The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the dark void between three star systems like a giant metal flower with its petals spread wide. The station housed the most important meeting place in the known galaxy where alien races from hundreds of worlds came to discuss trade deals, share knowledge, and settle disputes. Peaceful day, however, was different from any other day in the station's long history. The Grand Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species filled the curved rows of seats that spiraled around a central platform. Each alien delegate whispered to their neighbors in languages that sounded like music or grinding metal or flowing water, depending on their biology. At the center of the chamber stood something that made even the bravest warriors feel small and afraid. The Oracle of Zeftai rose from the platform like a living mountain, made of purple crystal. Its body pulsed with inner light that shifted from deep violet to brilliant white, and back again. Ancient runes carved into its surface glowed with power that was older than most civilizations. The Oracle had not spoken for over 200 years, which made this gathering even more special and terrifying. When the great being finally announced it would deliver a prophecy, every government in the galaxy sent their best diplomats to hear what it would say. Ambassador Kethra, from the Valorian Empire, sat in the front row with her 6 arms folded tightly. Across her chest her blue skin had turned pale with worry, and her large yellow eyes never left the Oracle. The Valorians were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors, who feared nothing, but even they showed respect for the ancient prophetic. Being High Counselor Zaxman of the Station Authority kept checking his datapad every few seconds. His insect-like features twitched with anxiety as he tried to maintain order among the growing crowd. The clicking sounds he made when nervous echoed through the chamber like a broken machine. Near the back of the chamber, a group of hive queens from the collective had begun what their species called death songs, low humming sounds that they made when they believed the end was near. Their translucent wings vibrated in harmony, creating an eerie melody that made everyone else even more uncomfortable. Lieutenant Jake Martinez, from the human diplomatic corps, sat halfway up the chamber, looking around at all the worried faces with genuine curiosity. He was a tall man with brown hair and friendly eyes who had been assigned to this post only 6 months ago. This was his first time seeing the Oracle speak, and he found the whole experience fascinating rather than frightening. The Oracle began to speak, and its voice filled every corner of the chamber without seeming loud. The words came not just through the air, but seemed to appear directly in the minds of everyone present, regardless of what language they normally used. The great being spoke of visions that had come to it in the deep meditation of its long silence. It described seeing fire that would consume entire worlds. Not the normal fire of stars or engines, but something far worse that would burn through the very fabric of space itself. The Oracle continued, with descriptions of despair so complete that entire civilizations would simply stop trying to exist. It spoke of hope dying like a candle flame in an endless wind, and of the darkness that would follow when even the memory of light was forgotten. As the prophecy unfolded, the alien delegates began to react with increasing terror. Ambassador Kethra fell from her seat to her knees and began making the prayer gestures of her people. High Counselor Zaxman dropped his datapad and started typing frantically on his emergency communication device. The hive queens increased the volume of their death songs until the sound filled the air like a living thing. Several smaller species had already fled the chamber, unable to bear hearing more of the terrible predictions. The Oracle described cosmic alignments that would tear holes in reality itself, allowing things from outside normal space to pour through like water through a broken dam. It spoke of ancient hungers that had waited eons for this moment, when the barriers between dimensions would grow thin enough to breach. When the great being finally reached the most important part of its prophecy, the chamber fell completely silent, except for the continued humming of the hive queens. The Oracle announced that all of these terrible events would begin when the twin suns of Kepler 442 aligned with the cosmic meridian. High Counselor Zaxman, immediately activated his calculation programs to determine when this alignment would occur. The computers worked for several long minutes, processing orbital mechanics and stellar positions while everyone waited in terrified silence when the results appeared on the main display screen. Several delegates fainted. The cosmic alignment would occur in exactly 5 standard days at 14:47 hours Galactic Standard Time, which translated to next Tuesday afternoon for most species. The chamber erupted in panic as aliens began shouting orders to their home worlds, demanding immediate evacuation of entire star systems. Some species started making plans to hide in deep space bunkers, while others discussed fleeing to different galaxies entirely. In the middle of all this chaos, Lieutenant Jake Martinez raised his hand like a student in a classroom and waited patiently for someone to notice him. The Oracle turned its ancient gaze toward the human, and the chamber gradually became quiet. Again Jake stood up and addressed the Oracle, directly asking what time the fire and despair were supposed to start, because he had scheduled a lunch meeting with the Andromedon trade delegation and had promised to bring those little triangle sandwiches they enjoyed so much. The silence that followed was so complete that the life support systems seemed loud in comparison. Every alien in the chamber stared at the human with expressions ranging from shock to horror to complete bewilderment. The Oracle studied Jake for a long moment, as if trying to understand what kind of creature could hear a prophecy of universal doom and respond with concerns about sandwich delivery schedules. The great being confirmed that the catastrophic events would begin at exactly 14:47 hours Galactic Standard Time. On the day the computers had calculated, Jake pulled out his personal tablet and opened his calendar application. He nodded thoughtfully as he made some adjustments to his schedule, then looked back up at the Oracle and announced that the timing worked fine for him. He then asked if anyone wanted coffee, because he was planning to make a trip to the station commissary and could pick up drinks for the group. The offer was made in the same casual tone someone might use to ask about the weather ambassador. Kethra made a choking sound and collapsed completely. High Counselor. Zaxman stared at his communication device as if it had suddenly started speaking in ancient poetry. The Hive Queen's death songs became so discordant that several other species covered their hearing. Organs. Jake waited politely for an answer to his coffee offer. When none came, he shrugged and headed toward the chamber exit. He paused at the doorway to mention that the commissary also had those pastries with the blue filling that everyone seemed to like, and he would be happy to bring some back. The human left the chamber to get refreshments. The greatest minds in the galaxy sat in stunned silence trying to process what they had just witnessed. The Oracle itself seemed confused for the first time in its ancient existence. The prophecy had been delivered, the doom was scheduled, and apparently one member of the audience was more concerned about beverage service than the end of civilization as they knew it. The emergency broadcast reached every ship and station within 50 light-years of Nexus Prime within hours of the Oracle delivering its terrible prophecy. The message contained full details of the predicted cosmic disaster, along with urgent recommendations for immediate evacuation of the affected sectors. Captain Lisa Stone received the transmission while her research vessel UES Curiosity was conducting a routine survey of mineral deposits near the outer rim. Her ship was a mid-sized exploration craft, with a crew of 30 humans and the latest scientific equipment that Earth could provide. Lisa read through the prophecy details twice before calling an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. She was a practical woman in her 40s, with short blonde hair and the kind of steady personality that made her perfect for long space missions. Her crew trusted her judgment completely. Ben Parker arrived first at the meeting carrying a cup of coffee and his ever-present datapad. The ship's xenobiologist was a thin man with messy brown hair, who got excited about anything involving alien life forms. He had been studying various species for over 10 years and still found new things fascinating every day. Engineer Amy Chen came next, still wearing her work coveralls with grease stains from the engine room maintenance she had been doing. Amy was a small woman with black hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She could fix almost anything mechanical, and had a talent for improving designs that other people thought were already perfect. Communications Officer Ryan Webb slipped in just as the meeting was starting. He was young and energetic, with red hair and freckles that made him look even younger than his 25 years. Ryan had grown up with social media and treated most situations like they were events worth documenting for posterity. Captain Stone displayed the emergency broadcast on the main screen and gave everyone a few minutes to read through the details. The prophecy was certainly dramatic with its descriptions of cosmic fire and universal despair, but her crew reacted to it much differently than the aliens at Nexus Prime. Had Dr. Parker immediately started taking notes about the dimensional barriers and cosmic alignments, he mentioned that this sounded like an excellent opportunity to observe interdimensional phenomena that scientists had only theorized about before. The chance to study actual rifts in space-time was incredibly exciting from a research perspective. Mi Chen looked at the technical specifications of what the Oracle had described and started sketching modifications to their ship systems. She pointed out that if reality was going to become unstable, they should probably test their emergency protocols anyway, and this seemed like perfect timing. Reb was already composing social media posts about the situation. He argued that if civilization was actually ending, someone should document the whole process for future generations, or at least for whatever species might evolve next. He had already started a hashtag called Apocalypse Tuesday. Captain Stone listened to her crew's suggestions and realized they were all treating this like an interesting work project. Rather than a reason to panic, she made the decision to alter course toward the predicted epicenter of the cosmic disaster because scientific observation was exactly what her ship was designed. Fourth journey to the danger zone took 3 days, during which time they encountered numerous alien vessels heading in the opposite direction. At maximum speed, the evacuation was clearly in full swing as entire fleets fled the area. The second day they met a convoy of Centaurian military ships, led by Admiral Vorthok, who was famous throughout the galaxy for his courage in battle. The proud warrior had never retreated from any enemy, but now his fleet was running away from empty space, where the disaster was supposed to occur. Admiral Vorthok contacted Captain Stone directly and begged her to turn her ship around. His voice cracked with emotion as he described the horror that awaited anyone foolish enough to remain in the area. He offered to escort the human vessel to safety in space. Lisa thanked the Admiral for his concern, but explained that her crew was looking forward to observing the phenomenon for scientific purposes. She mentioned that they had brought extra recording equipment and would be happy to share any interesting data they collected. The Admiral stared at her through the communication link for a long moment before breaking down in tears. He sobbed that humans were too brave for their own good, and that he would light memorial candles for their sacrifice. The entire Centaurian fleet changed course to avoid seeing what they assumed would be the destruction of the research vessel. On the third day they encountered a massive refugee convoy carrying millions of civilians from 12 different worlds. The convoy commander was a beetle-like alien named Klaxon, who had been coordinating the evacuation efforts. His species was known for being extremely organized and efficient. Commander Klaxon was amazed that any ship was still heading toward the disaster zone and assumed the humans must be lost. He offered to provide navigation data and escort services to help them reach safety. His concern was genuine and touching. Captain Stone politely declined the escort, but offered to share her ship's position with the refugee convoy in case they needed assistance. Later she mentioned that her crew was planning to set up observation equipment and would be monitoring all communication frequencies. Commander Klaxon thanked her, but clearly thought the humans were suffering from some kind of mental breakdown caused by fear. He made a note to send rescue ships back to search for survivors after the cosmic disaster was over. Meanwhile, back at Nexus Prime, Lieutenant Jake Martinez had indeed brought snacks to the Galactic Council. He set up a folding table outside the Oracle chamber with coffee makers, donut boxes, and a handwritten sign that read, "Apocalypse Viewing Party Free Refreshments." The station was in chaos as alien governments tried to coordinate massive evacuation efforts, but Jake continued his normal routine. He attended his scheduled meetings, answered his correspondence, and made sure the refreshment table stayed stocked. Confused, aliens began gathering around his table, unsure whether they should flee in terror or try the surprisingly good pastries. Jake offered recommendations based on each species' dietary requirements and engaged everyone in casual conversation about the upcoming cosmic event. Ambassador Kethra from the Valorian Empire stopped by the table while coordinating her people's evacuation fleet. She was still pale and shaking from the prophecy, but found herself accepting a cup of coffee and a small cake with pink frosting. Jake asked how the evacuation planning was going and offered to help with any logistics problems. The casual conversation seemed to calm Kethra down slightly, even though she kept looking around nervously, as if cosmic fire might appear at any moment. Counselor Zaxman also visited the refreshment table between emergency meetings. He grabbed a quick snack while updating Jake on the latest evacuation numbers. Over 200 billion beings had already left the affected sectors, with more fleeing every hour. The Oracle itself remained in the council chamber, occasionally making pronouncements about various details of the coming disaster. But even the ancient beings seemed confused by the human response to its prophecy. It had never encountered a species that treated universal doom as a catering opportunity. As Tuesday approached, the galaxy held its breath in terror, while a small group of humans prepared for what they considered an interesting scientific observation, with good food and proper documentation. Tuesday morning arrived like any other day aboard the U.S. Curiosity, with the crew following their normal routines. Captain Stone made her rounds, checking ship systems, while drinking coffee from her favorite mug. Dr. Parker reviewed his observation equipment one final time, and Amy Chen ran diagnostics on the newly modified shields. The ship had positioned itself at what calculations indicated would be the best viewing location for the cosmic alignment. They were far enough away to avoid immediate danger, but close enough to record detailed scientific data. Ryan Webb had set up multiple cameras and was live streaming the preparation activities. Several alien vessels had chosen to remain in the area, despite the evacuation orders. A few were other scientific ships whose crews shared the human fascination with rare phenomena. Others were military vessels whose commanders felt duty-bound to witness the disaster even if they could not prevent it. Captain Stone invited all nearby ships to join what her crew had started calling the Apocalypse Observation Party. The invitation was sent with coordinates for the best viewing positions and suggestions for proper recording equipment. Most alien captains politely declined, but a few accepted. The Andromedans sent their research vessel, Stellar Wind, whose captain was Dr. Nexus, a scientist who had worked with humans before. She understood their unusual approach to dangerous situations and trusted their judgment about safety precautions. A small Regelian survey ship called Quicksilver also joined the group. Its young captain, Vex, had heard stories about human adventures and wanted to see what made them so fearless in the face of cosmic disasters. As the morning progressed, the crew of Curiosity set up lawn chairs and a portable barbecue on their observation deck, the sight of humans preparing to grill food while waiting for reality to tear apart confused the alien observers, but they had learned not to question human logic. Parker spent the time before the alignment taking baseline readings of local space conditions. He wanted detailed before and after measurements to better understand how cosmic disasters affected the fundamental structure of reality. His equipment hummed quietly as it recorded. Amy Chen made final adjustments to the ship shields and emergency systems. She had designed new configurations based on her analysis of the Oracle prophecy, and was eager to test whether human engineering could protect against interdimensional threats. Ryan Webb live-streamed everything with commentary for his followers back on Earth and other human colonies. He explained the situation in casual terms, as if he were covering a sporting event rather than the potential end of civilization. At exactly 14:30 hours Galactic Standard Time, the cosmic alignment began. The twin suns of Kepler 442 moved into perfect position with the cosmic meridian, creating gravitational stresses that normal space could not handle. Reality responded by developing cracks. Like glass under too much pressure, these fractures started small but quickly widened into rifts that revealed glimpses of other dimensions beyond normal understanding. The spaces between the cracks showed impossible colors and geometries that hurt to look at. Directly through these rifts came something that the Oracle had accurately described as cosmic fire, but it was unlike any flame that existed in normal space. This fire burned cold and dark, consuming light instead of creating it. Wherever it touched, the stars grew dim and planets lost their warmth. The alien crews aboard the observation ships immediately began screaming in terror as waves of pure despair washed over them. The psychological effect was overwhelming, making every individual feel completely hopeless and alone in an uncaring universe. Captain Nexus of the Andromedans fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, while her crew huddled together for comfort. The Regalian captain, Vex, began speaking in his species' prayer language, asking their gods for protection from the cosmic horror. But the humans remained remarkably calm in the face of the supernatural disaster. Captain Stone opened a beer and commented that the light patterns reminded her of aurora displays she had seen in Alaska. Dr. Parker took readings, excitedly comparing the energy signatures to his theoretical models. Amy Chen started sketching shield modifications based on the dimensional energy patterns she was observing. She noted that the interdimensional forces followed predictable mathematical rules, which meant human technology could probably adapt to handle them. Ryan Webb continued his livestream, describing the cosmic fire as pretty spectacular, while answering questions from his audience about whether the barbecue was still working properly. The normalcy of his commentary was strangely comforting to anyone listening. The rifts in space continued expanding, and through the largest openings something truly terrifying began to emerge. A massive tentacled creature, the size of a small moon, pushed its way into normal reality. Its body was covered in eyes that burned with malevolent intelligence. The entity broadcast its thoughts directly into the minds of every nearby conscious being. It introduced itself as a devourer of hope, whose species had waited eons for this opportunity to feast on the despair of entire civilizations. Its mental voice was like ice water in the veins. The alien crews were completely paralyzed by terror, unable to think or move, as the cosmic horror focused its attention on their sector. But the humans continued their activities, as if nothing unusual was happening. Communications. Officer Webb responded to the entity's telepathic introduction by asking whether it needed permits for interdimensional travel, and if it planned to register as a local business or file as an interdimensional corporation for tax purposes. The creature paused in its dramatic speech, clearly confused by questions about bureaucratic procedures. Dr. Parker took advantage of the silence to ask about the entity's biology and whether it would be willing to participate in a research interview. Stone offered the cosmic horror a hamburger from their barbecue, explaining that they had plenty of food and believed in being good hosts to visitors. The entity's reaction to normal human politeness was complete bewilderment. Temi Chen suggested that she could probably build the creature a better dimensional portal using standard human engineering techniques. She pointed out several inefficiencies in its current method of reality manipulation. The cosmic fire continued burning around them, and the despair waves kept washing over the area, but somehow the humans' casual attitude began to have an unexpected effect. The supernatural forces seemed less threatening when treated as normal occurrences. The tentacled horror found itself in the unusual position of being ignored while attempting to terrify an entire sector. It had never encountered beings who responded to cosmic dread with offers of food and engineering advice. Other creatures began emerging from the dimensional rifts, but they all seemed confused by the human reaction instead of fleeing in terror or fighting. Desperately, the humans treated them like interesting new neighbors who had moved into the area. The cosmic alignment reached its peak, and the barriers between dimensions became thinner than ever before. Reality itself trembled under the strain of forces that should have torn the universe apart. but somehow the situation felt more like a neighborhood block party than an apocalyptic disaster. As the cosmic fires burned brighter, and the waves of despair grew stronger, something completely unexpected began to happen. The humans' casual attitude toward the apocalyptic events started spreading to the alien observers around them. It was not through any kind of psychic power or advanced technology, but simply through the basic example of staying come back. At Nexus Prime, Lieutenant Jake Martinez, refreshment table had become the unofficial gathering point for everyone still on the station. Instead of hiding in emergency shelters or fleeing in escape pods, alien dignitaries found themselves eating donuts while discussing the end of existence. Ambassador Kethra sat at the folding table with a cup of coffee in two of her hands and a pastry in a third. She was still nervous about the cosmic disaster, but found that talking with Jake about normal things helped keep the overwhelming terror at bay. High Counselor Zaxman stopped by between emergency communications to grab snacks. For his staff, he had started timing his crisis management breaks around Jake's coffee brewing schedule. The familiar routine of refreshment service provided stability in the chaos. Some of the Hive Queens had abandoned their death songs to try the blue-filled pastries that Jake had recommended. Their translucent wings still vibrated with anxiety, but the harmonies were becoming less mournful and more curious. The Oracle itself had moved closer to observe this strange gathering. The ancient being watched with fascination as its prophecy of universal despair was being countered by something as simple as humans sharing food and maintaining normal conversation. Jake treated everyone exactly the same, whether they were terrified refugees or cosmic entities. He offered snacks to everyone, asked about their day, and listened politely to their concerns about reality ending. His genuine friendliness was more effective than any weapon against despair. Meanwhile, in space near the dimensional rifts, Captain Stone's barbecue party was growing as more alien ships arrived to witness the cosmic disaster. The Andromedon research vessel had recovered from its initial terror, and Dr. Nexus was now helping with the food preparation. Captain Vex had stopped praying long enough to try human cooking for the first time in his life. He discovered that grilled vegetables worked well with his species' digestive system, and asked for the recipe to take back to his home world. The massive, tentacled cosmic horror had approached the observation area. Drawn by curiosity about the strange species that responded to universal doom with potato salad, Dr. Parker was interviewing the entity about interdimensional ecology, while Amy Chen took measurements of its dimensional manipulation abilities. The creature, which had spent countless eons feeding on fear and despair, found itself completely confused by humans, who treated its terrifying presence as an interesting research opportunity. When Ryan Webb asked for its social media handles so his followers could learn more about interdimensional beings, the entity experienced something it had never felt before. Cosmic horror was embarrassed. It had built its entire identity around being the most terrifying thing in multiple universes, but these humans were treating it like a slightly unusual neighbor who had moved in next door. When Amy Chen started explaining how she could improve its dimensional portal technology using standard human engineering, the embarrassment grew worse. Other eldritch beings emerged from the rifts, expecting to find civilizations cowering in terror. Instead, they discovered a barbecue party where humans were offering them food and asking about their hobbies. The beings found themselves answering questions about their interdimensional travel experiences and accepting invitations to try Earth-style cooking. Dar Parker had started an informal research project interviewing each cosmic entity about their home dimensions. He treated them exactly like any other alien species. He had studied asking about their biology, social structures, and cultural practices. The beings were so surprised by genuine scientific interest that they began competing to give the most detailed interviews. The cosmic fires continued burning, but they were no longer the center of attention. The interdimensional flames seemed less threatening when humans were using them as lighting for their outdoor dinner party. Amy Chen had even figured out how to redirect some of the energy to power their barbecue equipment. The waves of despair still washed over the area, but their effect was greatly reduced. The alien crews who had been paralyzed by terror began recovering. As they watched humans go about their normal activities, the psychological impact of cosmic dread was hard to maintain when people were discussing recipe modifications. Captain Stone found herself hosting an impromptu diplomatic dinner as representatives from dozens of species gathered around her ship's observation deck. The cosmic alignment had created the largest interdimensional contact event in galactic history, and it was happening over barbecued burgers. The tentacled cosmic horror, whose name was apparently unpronounceable in any normal language, had started going by Gary after Ryan. Webb suggested it might be easier for social media purposes. Gary turned out to be surprisingly interested in human culture, especially cooking techniques. Gary explained that his species had been consuming fear and despair for so long that they had forgotten there were other ways to interact with the universe. The concept of sharing food for pleasure rather than survival was completely foreign, but fascinating to Parker offered to help Gary apply for student visas to study at Earth's culinary institutes. The cosmic entity was genuinely excited about the possibility of learning new skills that did not involve terrifying entire civilizations. Emmy Chen had completed her analysis of the dimensional manipulation technology used by the Eldritch beings. She announced that she could probably build them much more efficient portals using human engineering principles. Several cosmic horrors lined up to discuss upgrades to their interdimensional travel systems. The rifts in space began to stabilize as the beings from other dimensions found better things to do than consume reality. The cosmic alignment was still in effect, but the supernatural disaster had transformed into something more like a cultural exchange program. Ryan Webb livestream had gained millions of viewers across the galaxy as word spread about humans turning an apocalypse into a dinner party. His casual commentary on cosmic horror etiquette was becoming legendary among species who had never imagined such a thing was possible. The Oracle of Zeftai sent a message to Nexus Prime, asking if humans would be interested in consulting on future apocalyptic prophecies to make them more user-friendly. The ancient being admitted that it had never seen a prediction handled quite like this. As the galactic day progressed toward evening, the cosmic fires began to die down, not because they had been defeated, but because they were no longer relevant. The Eldritch beings had found more interesting activities than destroying reality, and the waves of despair had been replaced by sounds of conversation and laughter. The prophecy had technically been fulfilled. There had indeed been fire and despair, but the humans' response had transformed it from a universe-ending catastrophe into what Captain Stone later described as an interesting Tuesday afternoon with unusual atmospheric conditions. By sunset, according to Galactic Standard Time, the cosmic apocalypse had completely fizzled out. The dimensional rifts were closing one by one as the Eldritch beings returned to their home dimensions, carrying takeout containers and business cards. From Dr. Parker, the cosmic fires had dimmed to a pleasant glow that several species were already discussing as potential lighting for future diplomatic events. Captain Stone stood on her ship's observation deck, looking out at space that had returned to normal. The stars were shining brightly again, and the only signs of the morning cosmic disaster were some interesting energy readings on their instruments and a collection of interdimensional recipes that Gary had shared. The barbecue party was winding down, but several alien crews had requested permission to stay longer. The Andromedans were planning a follow-up research collaboration, and the Regelians wanted to learn more human cooking techniques before returning to their home system. Parker was organizing his interview notes and preparing formal research proposals for studying interdimensional beings under controlled laboratory conditions. He had collected enough data to write papers for the next decade and was already planning return visits to some of the other dimensions. Sami Chen had received funding requests from 3 different cosmic entities who wanted her to design improved dimensional travel technology. She was particularly excited about a project to build a stable portal network that could be used for peaceful trade and cultural exchange. Webb was editing his livestream footage and preparing a documentary about the day's events. His social media following had grown by several million beings from species across the galaxy who wanted to learn more about human approaches to crisis management. Back at Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was reconvening, but instead of discussing emergency evacuations, they were planning a formal diplomatic dinner. The various alien species had been so influenced by human pragmatism that they were approaching the day's events as a learning experience rather than a traumatic disaster. Lieutenant Jake Martinez was being formally commended for what the Council officially described as revolutionary crisis management through snack deployment. His refreshment table had become a permanent fixture outside the Oracle Chamber, and several species had requested training in human hospitality techniques. Ambassador Key announced that the Valorian Empire wanted to establish a cultural exchange program with Earth, focusing on crisis response and community building. The proud warriors had been deeply impressed by the human ability to maintain morale during impossible situations. High Counselor Zaxman had officially redesigned the station's emergency protocols to include refreshment stations and informal gathering areas during future crises. The new procedures were based on observations of how human social activities had prevented panic and maintained rational thinking. The Oracle of Zeftai had privately requested a meeting with Dr. Parker to discuss the possibility of humans consulting on future prophetic announcements. The ancient being admitted that its traditional approach of delivering doom and gloom might benefit from some human perspective on user-friendly communications. Gary, the former cosmic horror, had submitted formal applications to study at 3 different Earth universities with particular interest in culinary arts and social psychology. The tentacled being was fascinated by human approaches to building community through shared experiences. Several other eldritch entities had also expressed interest in Earth culture and were working with Dr. Parker to arrange peaceful visits. Gary had volunteered to serve as a cultural ambassador, helping other cosmic beings understand human customs. Before their arrival, the dimensional rifts had closed completely, but not before several formal trade agreements were signed between human colonies and interdimensional civilizations. The cosmic alignment had accidentally created the most successful first contact event in galactic history. Captain Stone was completing her official report about the day's events for Earth Command. She described the cosmic disaster as a valuable scientific opportunity that had resulted in peaceful contact with previously unknown life forms. The report mentioned excellent crew performance and recommended increased funding for barbecue equipment on research vessels. Dr. Parker was already planning a follow-up expedition to study the long-term effects of dimensional instability on local space. He had received invitations to visit 12 different alien worlds, whose governments wanted to learn more about human scientific methods. Methazami Chen had been offered positions with 4 different galactic engineering firms who were interested in her dimensional technology innovations. She was considering starting her own company to focus on interdimensional infrastructure development. Tryon Webb was negotiating contracts for a series of documentary films about human space exploration. His footage of the Apocalypse Barbecue had become the most viewed content in galactic media history. Several alien entertainment companies wanted to license his work. The crew of U.S. Curiosity was preparing to head home, but their next mission had already been planned. The Galactic Council had officially requested human assistance with several other cosmic phenomena that were scheduled to occur over the next few months. Jake Martinez was organizing a going-away party for Gary, who would be departing for Earth the following week. The cosmic entity had become genuinely popular among the station staff, and several species had volunteered to help with the farewell celebration. As evening fell across the galaxy, the various species began reflecting on what they had learned from the day's events. The humans had demonstrated that perspective and community could overcome even cosmic-level threats through simple acts of kindness and maintaining normal routines. The Oracle delivered one final prophecy to the gathered council delegates, but this time its message was very different. The ancient being spoke of a future filled with unprecedented peace and cooperation among the species of the galaxy brought about by the sharing of small rectangular sandwiches and caffeinated beverages. The assembled representatives nodded thoughtfully and immediately began planning catering arrangements for future diplomatic meetings. Several species volunteered to contribute traditional foods from their home worlds to create a truly galactic menu. Captain Stone made a final entry in the ship's log, noting that they should pack more snacks for future deep space missions just in case they encountered any more cosmic entities with social anxiety issues. She also recommended adding folding tables and coffee makers to the standard exploration equipment list. The UES Curiosity departed the area the next morning, with its crew already discussing plans for next week's poker game. Dr. Parker had invited Gary to participate via interdimensional communication link, and Amy Chen was designing special cards that would work with tentacles. As they jumped to hyperspace heading back toward Earth, the crew received a message from the Galactic Council. The official communication thanked them for their service and included an invitation to cater the next major diplomatic summit. Tryon Webb immediately started planning his coverage of the diplomatic summit, while Dr. Parker began preparing research proposals for studying the long-term psychological effects of apocalypse prevention through hospitality. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about the power of maintaining normalcy in the face of cosmic terror, and the humans had gained several new friends among species they had never imagined existed. Tuesday had turned out to be a very good day for interdimensional relations, and an even better day for barbecue sales throughout the galaxy, as species everywhere began adopting human approaches to crisis management through community building and shared meals.